The Mystics Rant forbidden truths from the Grand Master who broke the code. They called it sacred. I called it a secret. Here's everything they never wanted you to know. Archie 1. The Breaking of Silence. Chapter 1. The Last Straw, Why I Can't Stay Silent Anymore. They told me not to write this. They warned me in symbols, in silence, in sideways glances during ceremonies we no longer understood. One even slid a note beneath my door. No signature, just a glyph and 6 words. Even light has its jailers. I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because they were too late. You see, the silence was never sacred. It was a cage. And I have spent too many decades locked in golden chains, worshipping the bars as though they were divine. I was 22 when they branded me worthy. 22 when they tied the blindfold, spun me thrice, and whispered riddles while the candles flickered like nervous witnesses. I remember the blood oath, the taste of iron, the whisper of something old breathing down my neck as they made me speak the ancient vow in a tongue I only half understood. I didn't know what I was binding myself to. None of us did. They call it initiation, but it's closer to sedation. You think you're waking up, but really they're just putting you to sleep in a more elaborate dream. You're taught to question everything except the order. You're told truth is sacred, but only the truth they feed you. For decades I obeyed. I climbed the ranks, learned the glyphs, memorized the prayers, guarded the gates. I performed the rituals even when they felt hollow. I held the secrets even when they rotted inside me, But something inside me began to crack. Not all at once, not loud. A hairline fracture, barely visible but growing. You feel it first in the silence after a chant, in the eyes of an elder who flinches during a blessing, in the way the symbols no longer radiate. Then it happens, the last straw. A child, bright, curious, wild with questions, asked me what the symbol above the door meant. The radiant spiral, the eye that watches without judgment. I looked at him and opened my mouth to speak the truth. And I lied. I lied to protect the doctrine. I lied because I was supposed to. I lied because I had been programmed to. And in that lie, I felt the entire architecture of the order groan beneath its own weight. That's when I knew. We've all become keepers of dead light. Truth, when hoarded, becomes poison. What was once sacred becomes sinister. What once liberated now enslaves. That's the irony they never taught you in the temple. And so I write. I write not because I want revenge. I write because I cannot keep carrying their coffin and calling it a crown. I write because I still believe there is something holy beneath the rot. And perhaps if we tear down the walls, some of that holiness will survive. Yes, this is a rant, but it is also a confession, a declaration, a spell, a scream. They will say I've lost my mind. They always do when someone refuses to worship the silence. Let them. Insanity in a world built on lies is just another name for seeing clearly. Do you want the truth? Good. Let it poison you. Let it pull the rug out from under your precious beliefs. That's how you'll know it's real. Let's start with this. The order was never about enlightenment. It was about containment, not of knowledge, of you. You, curious, infinite, and dangerous. You, who would burn kingdoms with a single forgotten memory. You, who once knew how to speak to stars and bend time with intention. They hid it from you, buried it beneath rituals, rules, robes, and robes beneath robes. They will tell you it was for your own good. That secrecy is a form of protection. Ask yourself, protection from what? Truth has never destroyed a soul. Only the lies we build around it do. Here's another secret. I was supposed to be the next Hierophant. The final crown. The living key. I turned it down, not because I lacked ambition, but because I'd already opened the door and seen what was inside. It wasn't light. It was leverage. A council of cowards clinging to power through mystery, using fear and awe as currency. A pantheon of self-styled sages who'd long since forgotten the difference between knowledge and illusion. But I remember, and if you keep reading, you will too. I won't promise you comfort. I'm not writing this to guide you gently towards some sanitized awakening. I will throw you into the fire and see what's left of you on the other side. If anything survives, perhaps that piece is worth saving. If not, then at least you'll know what burned. You may think this is just the rambling of a bitter old man. Fine. Let me be bitter. Bitterness is what's left when sweetness is wasted on liars. But mark my words. Once you see the machinery behind the myth, you will never pray the same way again. The eye does not protect. It watches. The circle is not sacred. It traps. The light is not pure. It blinds. I broke the oath the moment I told the truth to myself. This book is just the echo of that betrayal. Or liberation. Depending on what kind of soul you have. And if you've made it this far, you're already contaminated. Welcome to the rant. Chapter 2. The Cloak and the Cage, How Secrecy Became Tyranny. They told us the cloak was for protection. To guard the mysteries, to keep the profane from polluting the sacred, to preserve the light from those too blind to look upon it without trembling or tearing it apart. But they never mentioned how heavy it would get. Not at first. The cloak was beautiful. Hand-stitched symbols, golden lining, whispers of the ancestors sewn into the seams. When I wore it the first time, I felt chosen, elevated. As if the universe had leaned down to kiss my forehead and said, "You, child, you get to know." But knowing isn't freedom, not when knowledge is shackled to obedience. That cloak, once a symbol of wisdom, became a costume for a pageant of fear. You wear it long enough and you forget what your skin feels like. You forget you had a body before the robe, a voice before the vows, a soul before the scripts. We hid the truth from the world in the name of reverence, but reverence became rationing. And rationing became gatekeeping. And gatekeeping? Tyranny. Here's what they don't want you to understand. Secrecy is seductive. At first, it feels like intimacy, like whispering the divine into a lover's ear. But soon it curdles. It becomes power. The kind of power that says, "I know something you don't." And then, "I'll decide when you're worthy to know it." Do you see? That is the moment the sacred becomes a weapon. The very truth we were meant to protect ended up imprisoned beneath layers of rituals so ornate they might as well be walls. We didn't safeguard it, we suffocated it. We dressed it in codes so elaborate even we forgot how to read them. They made a labyrinth out of the light. And then they named the Minotaur Enlightenment. I have watched brothers starve on the path to wisdom, crawling on their knees through decades of tests and symbols, only to arrive at the final chamber and find, what? A mirror. A riddle. A joke. No truth, just more silence dressed as revelation. They told us secrecy was for the uninitiated. But eventually, you realize the uninitiated includes everyone, even the so-called masters. Yes, even me, Dot. You want to know how I found out? It wasn't during a ritual. It wasn't whispered through the ether by some ascended being. It happened on a Tuesday. Over tea, an elder, drunk on fermented honey and nostalgia, leaned over and said, "The real secret, boy? There's nothing left to keep." At first, I thought it was a test. Some Zen koan meant to unlock the next level of gnosis. But he wasn't smiling. He looked tired, hollow, like a man who had climbed the mountain only to find it was built on sand. We kept the secrecy going, not out of duty but out of momentum. A centuries-old inertia we were too afraid to stop, because stopping meant facing the void, and we were terrified the void would stare back and say, "You wasted your life chasing symbols carved by dead men." You ask me now why secrecy became tyranny. Because when you build your house on hidden foundations, every question becomes a threat. And questions are dangerous to tyrants. You begin to notice how they punish curiosity, not with violence, but with isolation. You ask the wrong thing and suddenly your invitations stop arriving. Your candle in the ritual chamber is accidentally left unlit. You are kept outside the next circle. A polite excommunication wrapped in smiles and sacred platitudes. Let me tell you what they fear most. A man who knows and still speaks. Not the uninitiated. Not the doubters. But the ones who saw behind the veil, touched the inner chamber, smelled the rot, and dared to say, "This is not divine. This is decay." That is why they silence us. That is why I was told to burn these pages before they ever reached you. But you need to understand the difference between the cloak and the cage. The cloak is meant to conceal, but temporarily, like the darkness of the womb before birth, like the curtain before the performance. It prepares you, warms you, hides you from the blinding truth until your eyes can bear it. But the cage? The cage is what happens when they forget to take the cloak off, when they make it permanent, institutional, holy, untouchable. And then they wrap it around your soul. I was caged for years, and I helped cage others. This is my repentance. You think secrets protect you, but some truths were never meant to be hidden. They are alive, you see. They breathe, and when you lock them away, they suffocate. They fester. And when they finally break free, as they always do, they don't come out as light. They come out as fire. So now I torch the cage, one chapter at a time. Next time you see a man in robes whispering secrets in the shadows, ask yourself, is he cloaked in wisdom or imprisoned in fear? Chapter 3. The Riddle of the Oath, the Twisted Power of Ancient Vows. Do you remember the first vow you ever made? Not the sweet promises whispered into lovers' ears under moonlight. Not the childish Pinky swears over stolen candy. I mean the real ones, the ones that echo through the marrow of your bones. long after the lips that spoke them have forgotten the shape of the words. Oaths are not words. They are spells. And no one tells you this when they tie the blindfold and press the dagger to your chest. I was 19 when I took mine. That's young for most orders. But I was eager, hungry, desperate to belong, desperate to matter. So I knelt, trembling in the candlelit chamber, with incense thick as old lies curling into my lungs, and I spoke the words I was told to speak. The vow was ancient, in a tongue I did not know, but that my mouth somehow remembered. That should have been my first clue. They say language is a tool, but in truth it's a lock. Certain sounds open certain doors. Some lead to memory, others to madness. The syllables of the oath were sharp, not like knives. Like keys, cut to fit a door in the soul I didn't even know was locked. I said the words, and something in me shifted. I wish I could say it felt like awakening. It didn't. It felt like surrender. Like a part of me had been signed away in invisible ink. Like I had handed over my sovereignty in exchange for mystery and didn't realize the interest rate. Let me say this plainly, an oath is a leash. Not at first. At first it feels like power. You are welcomed, affirmed, told you are now part of a lineage of the wise. You wear the symbol. You learn the names. You feel chosen. But then it begins. The oath begins to work on you. It changes how you speak, how you think, how you doubt. Because every moment of inner rebellion is met with that whisper in the back of your mind. Remember your vow, and suddenly, truth is no longer what's true. It's what doesn't violate the oath. Freedom becomes filtered, vision becomes narrow, and the worst part, you do it to yourself. That's the riddle, isn't it? The vow doesn't imprison you. You imprison you on behalf of the vow. You stop asking questions because the questions feel like betrayal. You stop seeing clearly because clarity risks conflict. You become a guardian not of truth, but of doctrine. A soldier sworn to an idea you never fully understood, and you smile as you do it. I've seen men bind their own tongues with silence. Seen women burn their dreams at the altar of loyalty, all for an oath that was never explained, only recited, chanted, echoed, like a lullaby in a language no one translates anymore. Why? Because mystery is more useful than meaning. Because when you don't understand what you've promised, you can be made to believe it means anything. I once asked an elder, a man who'd worn the sigil longer than I'd been alive, what the oath truly meant. He looked at me with eyes like burnt parchment and said, "It means what we need it to mean." That was when the rot became visible. We weren't guardians of ancient wisdom. We were actors in a script we'd lost the ending to. Repeating lines written by ghosts, performing loyalty to an idea none of us could define. So I began to study the language of the vow. I tore through forbidden texts, found fragments of the original dialect, pieced together the old syntax like an archaeologist of forgotten bondage, and what I found made me tremble. The vow was not a promise to protect truth. It was a pact to preserve secrecy, to elevate silence above clarity, to protect the structure of the order even at the cost of its soul, to maintain the illusion of wisdom even when we'd long since lost the light. We were never meant to share. We were meant to hoard. And in that hoarding, we became hollow. Oaths, real oaths, should tether you to something higher, something alive. But ours had become a fossilized chain, dragging us deeper into performance, deeper into parody, deeper into protection for protection's sake. I broke mine the day I wrote this book. I knew the cost. I accepted it. They say breaking the oath brings spiritual ruin, that the universe punishes oath breakers. Maybe it does, but I'd rather be damned with truth than sanctified by silence. So here I am, pulling at the chain with both hands, daring it to choke me. Let this chapter be my severance. Let it be yours too, because you, dear reader, have taken oaths as well, though you may not know it. Social contracts, cultural spells, agreements you never truly agreed to. And they whisper to you every time you question, every time you wonder, every time you dare to reach beyond the veil. Stay silent, stay safe, stay asleep, but you don't have to. You never did. Ask yourself this. What have you sworn to without knowing the cost? And who profits from your loyalty?